It's been described as the worst treatment disaster in the history of the NHS. Between 1970 and 1991, around 6,000 people became infected with hepatitis C after receiving blood products from the NHS. Another 1,500 were infected with HIV. Most had been receiving treatment for haemophilia. More than 2,000 are since believed to have died. In the 10 years since then, governments have apologised and some of those who suffered received compensations. But calls for a public inquiry into the scandal have fallen on deaf ears. Today that changed when Theresa May announced unexpectedly to her cabinet that she would order an inquiry, precise format to be confirmed. The move may not have been entirely unconnected with the threat to the Prime Minister that she's facing potentially losing a Commons vote in an emergency vote, emergency motion on the subject. Tonight, she said this.
I want to ensure that this inquiry is going to provide the answers that the victims and their families want as to how this was able to happen. And it's affected so many people, and they have waited too long for these answers. What we want to do is talk with the families, talk to them about the shape that this inquiry should take, so we ensure that it is able to provide the answers and the justice that they want and deserve.
One of those who's been waiting almost 2 decades for light to be shone onto the scandal of the NHS's contaminated blood is Lauren Palmer. Her father, Stephen, was a haemophiliac who contracted hepatitis C and HIV through a contaminated blood transfusion in the mid-1980s. Before he realised he had unknowingly passed HIV to his wife, Barbara, and when Lauren was just 9 years old, she lost both her parents in the space of 8 days. Lauren, having gone through that terrible tragedy, did you feel also that you were growing up with a stigma?
Massively. I remember being told that I couldn't even breathe a word of what had happened, just with the association of the stigma around HIV alone. So I never spoke of it when I was younger at all. It's only really recent, in the last couple of years, that I've sort of been more open about it, especially within my job as well. At the moment it's quite encouraged because their charity is all based around HIV as well, so I've begun to sort of start telling my story. But yes, growing up, I literally just couldn't talk about it.
Who did you go and live with after this had happened?
I was taken into care by legal guardianship of my auntie and my uncle, so my mother's sister at the time.
What does today's announcement mean to you?
Oh, such a relief. It couldn't have been better news. I know for a fact that so many people have been fighting for this outcome for many, many years. I'm one of the lucky ones. I've literally just come into the campaign off the back of the Panorama TV show, but there have been people that have been relentlessly fighting and continually campaigning for this for such a long time, and I'm beyond happy with the results today. It wasn't expected, so it was even more of a relief, I think, for us all.
Well, you say it wasn't expected, and it's 20 years. I mean, presumably for much of your life, you've gone through just assuming this thing would never be properly dealt with, and you'd never receive a real explanation of everything that had happened and why.
No. So this is really, well, yeah, like you say, very unexpected, but we are over the moon with it, and it's just the beginning now. It's still going to take a long time, a long fight to get the real truth and justice and answers from what actually happened.
What's the end point of that process for you? Is it seeing people in the dock? Is it literally prosecutions?
It's closure for all of us that have been affected and the people that have been infected, that no one's been accountable for it. that's really ultimately what everyone wants. They want to know why it happened, how a mistake on this magnitude can occur, and just us wanting answers. That's all we want. We just want the justice and the system to be.
And if that means people being in court, taken to court, as happened in France, for example,
Yeah.
then that's part of that process for you, isn't it?
It is, yes.
To what extent did your parents understand the cause of what had happened to them, and to what extent would they have wanted to see this day?
I know my mum was fighting for about 3 years before she passed away, and she never got anywhere with it. It was then passed on to my aunt, who then continually tried to find answers and fight for that for a good few years, and then again that fell on deaf ears. It didn't really amount to anything. So now I'm holding that flag for my mum, doing it for her and doing it for all the other families that have been affected by this as well. It's a real community out there now, and we all want the same thing, and that's what we all want.
Lauren, thank you so much for explaining that to us.
Thank you for having me.